We've all been there, right? That knot in your stomach, that mind that just won't stop racing. We call it worry. But what if I told you that most of that worry isn't actually real, and that you have the power to make it disappear, not by wrestling with it, but by understanding how you created it in the first place?
Seriously, just take a second and ask yourself this. That deadline you're freaking out about, or that awkward thing you said last week, is any of that happening in this exact moment? The answer is almost always a big, fat no. And that realization, well, that's the key that unlocks everything.
Okay, so here's the absolute core of it all. Worry is a ghost. It's a story we tell ourselves, built from fragments of the past or fantasies about the future. It feels incredibly real, I know, but it has zero power in the here and now. And here's the best part. Because we are the ones who create it, we can also be the ones to uncreate it.
All right, let's get into it. We've got a clear path ahead. First, we'll look at how we actually build worry. Then, we're going to learn how to rewrite our past. After that, we'll discover how to expand our choices right now in the present. And finally, we'll step into our power as the true author of our own story.
So how in the world do we do this? How do we manufacture this feeling seemingly out of thin air? Well, it turns out it's a uniquely human talent. It's this wild feature of our incredible minds that we can, and often do, turn against ourselves.
I mean, just think about it for a second. You're never going to see a dog paralyzed by a memory of a bad haircut, or a squirrel stressed about its retirement plan. Animals live completely in the now. We, on the other hand, have this superpower to time travel in our minds, constantly replaying old hurts and pre-playing future disasters.
Let me tell you a quick story from the source material. Picture this. A man is on the verge of realizing his lifelong dream of opening a curry shop. He's excited, of course, but he's also completely terrified. He's not worried about the challenges of today, like getting the spices right. Nope, he's worried about a future that doesn't even exist yet.
And this just nails the point perfectly. He had actual money in the bank, but in his mind, he was already broke. He was feeling all the pain, the shame, and the stress of failure before he'd even sold a single plate of curry. He built a prison of worry and locked himself inside. Now that we see how the prison is built, let's talk about how to break out.
This brings us to our very first actionable step. A ton of our self-doubt and anxiety is tangled up in the past. But what if the past you keep replaying isn't the whole truth? What if it's just a story, and you're the one holding the pen? This is so important to get. There's a huge difference between a fact and a memory. The fact is what happened. A thing occurred. That's set in stone. But your memory? That's the narrative, the story you've built around that fact. It's the meaning you've given it, the emotions you've attached to it. And that story? Oh yeah, that can absolutely be changed.
The source gives this incredibly powerful example of a woman who carried this deep trauma from her school days. For 2 decades, the story running on a loop in her head was, I was bullied by everyone. The entire class of 30 people hated me. And that belief just crushed her self-esteem.
But then, she started to really look closer at that memory, to really examine it, and the story began to shift. She realized it wasn't 30 people who hated her, it was one person who was cruel, and the other 29, they were just bystanders, probably too scared to intervene. This didn't erase her pain, but it completely reframed the story. She went from being universally hated to being the target of one person's malice. That's a huge difference.
And that one shift was everything. By rewriting that story, she took away its power over her. This is our first step. Question the stories you tell yourself about your past. They might not be as rock solid as you think. Changing that story is how you heal the self-negating wound that's been holding you back.
Okay, so we've addressed the past, but what about that immediate punch-in-the-gut anxiety that hits you in the present moment? This brings us to our second, and probably most practical step, consciously expanding your choices.
Think about the times you felt the most desperate in your life. That feeling of being totally overwhelmed, like the walls are closing in. The source argues that this feeling of utter despair almost always comes from a single thought, a cognitive trap, the belief that you have no other options, that this is it and there's no way out.
So here's the game plan. The very next time you feel that wall of anxiety closing in, to stop. Take out a piece of paper, open a notes app, whatever, and just start listing every single thing you could possibly do. The point here isn't to find the perfect solution. The point is to prove to your own brain that the belief, I have no choice, is a flat-out lie.
Just look at this example.
Your boss criticizes you, and your mind spirals into, I'm a failure, I'm going to get fired. But hang on, look at all the choices. Some are productive, some are avoidant, some are completely ridiculous, like flying to Okinawa. It doesn't matter. The simple act of creating this list shatters the illusion of being trapped. You immediately go from a place of powerlessness to a place of possibility.
Let this one really sink in. Your freedom isn't determined by your circumstances. It's determined by your perception of your choices. And you always, always have them. Believing this is the antidote to despair. So, we've learned to rewrite the past and expand our choices in the present. This leads us to the final unifying principle. If you can change the story of what was, and you can change the options for what is, then you have absolute power over what will be.
The source material centers on this beautiful Japanese phrase, "so omortara so." It basically means, if you think it is so, then it is so. Now, this isn't just fluffy positive thinking. It's a recognition of your creative power. The guy with the curry shop thought he would have debt, and so, in his mind, he did. The woman thought she was hated, and so, in her reality, she was. What you choose to believe becomes the world you live in.
And you know, the biggest story we tell is the one about ourselves. The source says that all conflict, all judgment of others really begins with how we judge ourselves. When you're constantly telling yourself you're not good enough, you create a world where you have to prove yourself. But when you stop that internal attack, when you truly accept yourself, the need for external conflict just kind of melts away.
So, let's bring it all home. To reclaim your power from anxiety, you have 3 jobs. First, you're the editor of your past, rewriting those self-negating stories you've been carrying around. Second, you're the strategist of your present, actively creating choices to break the illusion of being trapped. And third, you are the author of your future, consciously choosing the reality you want to bring to life.
Your mind is an incredibly powerful tool. You've already proven you can use it to build these complex, detailed worlds of worry and anxiety basically out of nothing. So just imagine what happens when you turn that immense creative power toward joy, toward possibility, toward peace. The choice, as always, is yours.